The arrival, the sky split open like torn fabric, revealing something that shouldn't exist. Xander Korvik pressed his weathered face against the cracked window of his underground bunker, watching the impossible unfold above New Sydney's ruins. The massive vessel hung motionless in the crimson twilight, its crystalline surface shifting through colors that had no names. It wasn't built, it was grown, organic curves flowing like frozen music, pulsing with an inner light that made his teeth ache. "Papa Xander," whispered Nix, the 7-year-old girl he'd pulled from the rubble 3 months ago. Her parents had been incinerated in the corporate wars, another casualty of humanity's final tantrum. "What is it?" Xander's scarred hands found her shoulders. 20 years of black market dealings, 12 confirmed kills, and enough betrayals to damn a dozen souls, yet this child saw something in him worth trusting. "I don't know, little spark. But it's not from here." The ship's arrival triggered pandemonium across the dying planet. Emergency broadcasts crackled through dying satellites, governments collapsing faster than dominoes, military forces deserting en masse, civilians flooding toward major cities in desperate pilgrimages. Everyone could feel it, the bone-deep vibration that spoke without words, promising salvation to those who qualified, but qualification wasn't measured in wealth or power. Captain Dex Mordain, former head of Earth's planetary defense, stood atop his command bunker watching his entire fleet, the last remaining symbol of organized resistance, simply shut down. Every weapon, every engine, every communication array went silent the moment the ship appeared. His soldiers stared upward with the same mixture of terror and hope etched on their faces. "Sir," Lieutenant Voss stammered, "the readings are impossible. That thing exists in more dimensions than our senses can detect. It's scanning us." Mordain felt it too, invisible fingers rifling through his memories, weighing his choices. The villages he'd abandoned to save strategic positions. The civilian transports he'd sacrificed to delay enemy advances. Each decision necessary, each one burning holes in whatever remained of his soul. Across the wasteland, Dr. Kai Thornfield, the rogue geneticist who'd spent 5 years secretly developing immunity boosters for radiation-poisoned children, emerged from his hidden laboratory. The ship's presence made his experimental treatments glow with impossible light. Children who should have died were suddenly thriving, their cellular damage reversing as if time itself was rewinding their suffering. The energy signature, he breathed, watching his young patients' joy as they ran without pain for the first time in years. It's responding to intent, not action. The ship pulsed once, and across Earth, a message bloomed in every mind simultaneously: not heard, but known. We are the architects of the 7th dimension, where effect precedes cause and souls are measured by their resonance with universal compassion. Your species stands at the threshold of extinction. We offer exodus to those whose hearts carry the frequency of true worth. Step forward, children of terror. Let us see who among you deserves the stars. As night fell, millions began their pilgrimage toward the ship's resting place above the ruins of what had once been called Australia. The judgment had begun, the convergence. The Australian wasteland became humanity's final arena. Millions converged from every corner of the dying Earth, creating a sea of desperate faces beneath the hovering Leviathan. The ship's crystalline hull cast prismatic shadows across refugee camps that stretched beyond the horizon. Xander clutched Nix's hand as they navigated through the chaos. His military-grade scavenging suit drew unwanted attention. Raiders assumed he carried valuable supplies, while desperate families begged him to share non-existent resources. Each encounter tested his resolve to remain invisible. Why are people fighting? Nix asked, watching a group of corporate security forces gun down refugees trying to reach the ship's perimeter. Fear makes people forget who they used to be, Xander replied, steering her away from the violence. He'd done worse things for lesser reasons, but somehow her presence made those memories feel like they belonged to someone else. Near the ship's base, Dr. Thornfield established a field hospital using salvaged medical equipment. The seventh dimensional vessel's proximity had unexpected effects. His treatments worked with miraculous efficiency, healing radiation burns in hours instead of months. Word spread quickly, drawing hundreds of sick children to his makeshift clinic. "Doctor, we are overwhelmed," gasped Bix Valdris, a former military medic who'd volunteered to help. Her cybernetic arm, a souvenir from the corporate wars, sparked as she lifted another patient. "There are too many." Thornfield wiped sweat from his brow, noting how the ship's energy made his aging body feel decades younger. "Then we save who? We can teach others to save the rest. Knowledge shared is never truly lost." Meanwhile, Captain Mordain found himself leading not through authority but through necessity. His military rank meant nothing here, but his tactical experience proved invaluable in organizing supply distribution and mediating conflicts between desperate groups. Former enemies worked alongside each other under his guidance, united by their shared hope of passage. "The ship's been scanning for 3 days," reported Voss, now serving as Mordain's aide by choice rather than rank. "Energy readings suggest it's categorizing people somehow." Mordain watched a group of war profiteers attempt to approach the ship's boarding ramp. The crystalline surface flared with crimson light, and the men simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but unmade, as if they'd never been born. "It's not categorizing," he realized. "It's judging." The ship's selection process defied all logic. Wealthy politicians crumbled to ash while homeless veterans passed through unharmed. Corporate executives vanished instantly, but a street thief who'd spent her last credits buying medicine for orphans stepped aboard without incident. Each attempt to board revealed another facet of the architect's criteria. Jenka Drex, a former assassin turned protector of trafficking victims, approached the ramp with a group of rescued children. She'd killed 47 people in her career, all of the monsters who preyed on the innocent. As her foot touched the ship's threshold, golden light enveloped her and the children. They were accepted, but mercy alone wasn't enough. Marcus Vell, a pacifist priest who'd refused to take up arms even when raiders slaughtered his congregation, was rejected. His passive goodness, while pure, lacked the active courage the architects required. As the fourth day dawned, patterns emerged. The ship accepted those who'd made hard choices for others' benefit, who'd sacrificed personal safety for strangers' welfare, who'd transformed their own darkness into light for the world. It rejected those who'd harmed others for personal gain, who'd remained passive in the face of evil, or who'd corrupted themselves beyond redemption. Xander watched the selection process with growing dread. His sins were numerous and documented in scars across his soul. But as Nick slept in his arms, trusting him completely despite knowing nothing of his past, he wondered if love could outweigh judgment. The ship pulsed once more, and suddenly everyone could sense it. Time was running short. One final day remained before the architects departed, taking their chosen passengers to whatever lay beyond the stars. The last judgment was at hand. The weight of Sol's dawn of the final day brought revelation. The ship's hull became transparent, revealing vast chambers within where the chosen waited. Families held each other in crystalline cocoons, their faces serene as they floated in pools of liquid starlight. The sight drove the remaining crowds into frenzy. Xander pressed through the mob with Nix clinging to his back. Bodies crushed against bodies as people fought for position near the boarding ramp. The ship's security measures activated more frequently. Now, flashes of crimson light erasing the unworthy who grew too aggressive or desperate. "I can't breathe," Nix whispered. Without hesitation, Xander shouldered through the crowd, using his bulk to create space. When a panicked man shoved Nix aside, Xander's old instincts flared. His hand moved toward the concealed blade he still carried, but stopped when he felt her small fingers grip his wrist. "Papa Xander, remember what you taught me. Violence makes more violence." Her words cut deeper than any wound he'd ever received. This child, who'd lost everything, still believed in choosing kindness over vengeance. Meanwhile, he'd spent 20 years proving that might made right. Across the crowd, Dr. Thornfield made an impossible decision. His medical supplies could save perhaps 50 more children, but hundreds needed treatment. He began teaching basic medical techniques to anyone willing to learn, giving away his knowledge freely even though it meant his own expertise became redundant. "Sir, you're making yourself obsolete," Pix observed, watching him demonstrate for insertion to a former corporate accountant. "Good," Thornfield replied, handing her his last vial of universal antibiotic. "The measure of a teacher is how unnecessary they become." Captain Mordain faced his own moment of truth when a group of his former soldiers cornered a family of refugees. The soldiers wore the insignia of Earth's most notorious war criminals, men he'd once commanded, now claiming territorial rights over the ship's perimeter. "Captain, you always said survival trumped morality," Sergeant Hack sneered, weapon trained on cowering civilians. "Time to prove it." Mordain stepped between the gun and its targets. "I said a lot of things I wish I could take back. But I won't let you murder children in my name." The confrontation ended when the ship itself intervened. Hack and his squad were dissolved by crimson light, while Mordain and the rescued family were enveloped in protective golden energy. The ship had witnessed his choice and found it worthy. As afternoon shadows lengthened, the ship's transparent hull revealed disturbing truth. The chosen weren't simply passengers, they were being transformed. Their bodies remained human, but their souls glowed with inner light, becoming something more than purely terrestrial. The architects weren't just evacuating refugees, they were evolving them. This revelation sparked final acts of desperation. Corporate militias launched futile attacks on the ship, their weapons dissolving before impact. Religious extremists proclaimed the vessel demonic, leading suicide charges that ended in instant erasure. Politicians offered bribes to the chosen, begging them to surrender their places aboard, but the most heartbreaking scenes came from the worthy themselves. Parents who'd been accepted watched their children get rejected. Spouses found themselves separated by the ship's judgment. Heroes discovered that their loved ones' souls carried frequencies too damaged for salvation. Jenka Drex faced this agony when her younger brother Tomek approached the ramp. She'd spent years searching for him after traffickers took him as a child. Now, finally reunited, she watched in horror as crimson light began forming around his feet. "Jenka, I did things," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Things I had to do to survive. I became them." She grabbed his hand, trying to pull him into the golden light surrounding her. For a moment, the energies mixed, gold and crimson swirling together. Then the ship pulsed, and Tomek was gone. The ship's message echoed in every mind: love cannot redeem what the soul has chosen to become, but it can illuminate the path forward for those still capable of walking it. As evening approached, the boarding ramp began to retract. Thousands of people still waited their turn, but the architects had seen enough. They'd found their passengers, roughly 1 in every 10,000 humans, had proven worthy of ascension. The final selections would determine not just who lived, but what humanity would become among the stars. The final judgment sunset painted the sky the color of dying dreams as the ship prepared for departure. The boarding ramp extended one final time, and the remaining crowds pressed forward with the desperation of the truly damned. These were humanity's last moments to prove itself worthy of salvation. Xander found himself at the ramp's base with Nick still clinging to his shoulders. The golden light that marked acceptance flickered around the child but remained steadfastly absent from him. His sins were too numerous, too deeply carved into his soul's frequency. 20 years of choosing survival over morality had permanently altered his resonance. The little one may pass, came the ship's voice in his mind, gentle but implacable. You may not. Nix felt the separation immediately. As her feet touched the ramp, golden light enveloped her completely, but Xander hit an invisible barrier that felt like walking into liquid steel. She turned back, confusion and terror warring in her 7-year-old eyes. Papa Xander. Come with me. He knelt before her, hands shaking as he touched her face one last time. I can't, little spark. This is as far as I go. But you saved me. You protected me. You're good. No, Nix. I'm not good. I've done terrible things, killed people, stolen from the desperate, betrayed those who trusted me. But you made me remember what I could have been. He pressed something into her hand, a crude wooden horse he'd carved for her during their journey. Take this with you to the stars. Remember that even broken people can choose to love. The child's tears fell like rain on scorched earth. I won't go without you. Yes, you will, Xander said firmly. Because that's what love means, choosing what's best for someone else, even when it hurts. He gently pushed her toward the ship's interior. Live, Nix. Live for all of us who couldn't. Similar scenes played out across the boarding area. Dr. Thornfield watched his last patient, a young girl named Luna whose immunity treatments had finally succeeded, walk aboard alone. Her parents had both been rejected, casualties of their desperate choices during the resource wars. Will you tell them about us? Thornfield called to her. Luna nodded sullenly. I'll tell them about the doctor who gave everything to save children he'd never met. Captain Mordain faced his own separation when Lieutenant Voss approached the ramp. The young officer had followed orders without question throughout the war, making him complicit in atrocities he'd never personally committed. The ship's judgment was harsh but precise. Following orders was not absolution. Sir, what do I do now? Voss asked, his voice breaking as golden light refused to acknowledge him. You live, Mordain replied, surprising himself with the words. You find others who need protecting, and you do better than I taught you. Make the choice I should have made years ago. As the ramp began its final retraction, the ship's transparent hull revealed the chosen in their transformation chambers. They floated in pools of liquid starlight, their human forms slowly adapting to handle the journey between dimensions. Their consciousness remained, but their bodies were evolving beyond terrestrial limitations. The sight triggered one last wave of desperate action. A group of corporate executives tried to storm the ship using experimental combat armor, only to be instantly vaporized. Religious fanatics proclaimed the chosen must be stopped from contaminating humanity's afterlife, launching a suicide attack that achieved nothing but their own erasure. But amid the chaos, something unprecedented occurred. As the ship began to rise, its hull suddenly blazed with new light, not the golden acceptance or crimson rejection it had shown before, but a pure white radiance that seemed to acknowledge something beyond simple worthiness. The voice of the architects echoed across the wasteland one final time, "We have seen your species in its final hour." Most chose destruction over creation, selfishness over sacrifice. But a few, a precious few, chose love over survival, hope over despair, redemption over revenge. These we take with us to the stars, not as refugees, but as seeds of what humanity might become. The ship paused in its ascent, hovering just above the crowd's reach. To those who remain, your world is ending, but your story is not. The worthy among you carry the same light as those we take. Find each other. Protect each other. Choose to be more than your worst moments. Perhaps, when next we pass through this dimension, we will find you ready to join your children among the infinite. With that, the ship vanished, not gradually, but instantly, as if it had never existed at all. The only proof of its presence was the sudden absence of the chosen and the lingering resonance in the bones of those left behind. In the silence that followed, the survivors looked at each other with new eyes, seeing not the enemies they'd been, but the family they might yet become. What remained 6 months after the departure, Earth still turned on its axis, but everything else had changed. The collapse many predicted never came. Instead of descending into final chaos, the survivors began building something unprecedented: communities. Based not on what people had been, but on what they chose to become. The ship's judgment had created an unexpected legacy. Those left behind knew exactly what virtues mattered most. Xander found himself leading one such community in the ruins of New Sydney. His past as a killer and thief was common knowledge, but so was his love for Nix and his final act of sacrifice. When desperate souls needed protection from roving gangs, they came to him. When children needed someone who understood loss, they found him carving wooden toys in the evening firelight. "Why do you help us?" asked Vera, a former corporate lawyer who'd lost everything when the companies collapsed. "After everything, why care about strangers?" Xander looked up from the wooden horse he was crafting, the 100th replica of the one he'd given Nix. "Because she believed I could be better than my worst day." Maybe that's true for all of us. Dr. Thornfield had established a network of medical outposts across the continent, training anyone willing to learn. His former position as a rogue scientist meant nothing now. His value lay in what he could teach. When supplies ran low, he'd developed ingenious ways to synthesize medicines from common materials. "The ship's energy is gone," he explained to his latest group of students, "but the knowledge it helped us understand remains. We can't heal at miracle speed anymore, but we can still heal." Pix, now his chief instructor, demonstrated suturing techniques on a practice dummy. Her cybernetic arm had been damaged in the evacuation chaos, but she'd learned to work with the limitation rather than see it as a failure. The architects chose our people based on their hearts, not their abilities. We honor that by helping others develop both. Captain Mordain discovered his true calling in the aftermath. Without rank or authority, he became a mediator between surviving settlements, using his strategic mind to prevent conflicts rather than win them. Former enemies worked together under his guidance, united by shared determination to prove themselves worthy of eventual reunion with the chosen. "Every choice is a chance for redemption," he told a gathering of settlement leaders. "The ship showed us that our past doesn't define our future, our response to tomorrow does." Lieutenant Voss, who'd taken Mordain's lessons to heart, established a training program for young adults who wanted to protect their communities without repeating the mistakes of the old military. They called themselves the Shepherds, and their motto was simple: protect, don't dominate. The most remarkable change came in how people treated children. Every settlement prioritized their care and education above all else. These young survivors were taught not just practical skills, but the values the ship had deemed worthy: compassion, sacrifice, active courage, and the willingness to choose others' welfare over personal gain. In the evenings, around fires built from the ruins of the old world, people told stories of the chosen. They spoke of Nyx's innocent wisdom, of Luna's brave acceptance of her solitary journey, of Jenka's brother who'd found peace in his final moments. These tales became the foundation of a new mythology, not of gods and monsters, but of ordinary people who chose to be extraordinary when it mattered most. Some settlements built memorial walls listing the names of the taken, not as mourning but as inspiration. Children learned to recite these names like prayers, promising to live up to the standard the architects had revealed. "Do you think they'll come back?" asked a young girl during one such recitation. Her teacher, a former wasteland raider who'd spent 2 decades destroying what others built, smiled gently. "Maybe. But even if they don't, we're not the same people we were before. We know now what we are capable of becoming." 6 months became a year, then 2. Earth's population had been reduced to perhaps 50 million survivors scattered across the globe, but they were building something unprecedented, a civilization based on the values that transcended dimensional barriers. They called it the Frequency, and its citizens were measured not by wealth or power, but by how much light they brought to others' darkness. Some nights, when the aurora danced across the sky in patterns that seemed almost artificial, people wondered if the ship was watching. If somewhere among the stars, Nyx was growing up in halls of crystalline wonder, carrying her wooden horse and telling other children about the broken man who'd learned to love. The 7th dimension had judged humanity and found most of it wanting. But in taking the worthy and leaving the rest with knowledge of what worthiness meant, they'd planted seeds of transformation that might, eventually, bloom into something deserving of the stars. In the end, perhaps that had been the point all along. The judgment was complete, but the redemption had only just begun.